So
I'm
like,
going to ask you a completely crazy question, just popped in my mind, but in your study, are there different cultures on this planet that are more receptive to what you're describing, or already have a tendency to think more along these lines than other cultures?
I mean, I definitely find far more parallels to the kind of view of the world and way of approaching it, like even from a sort of almost logical point of view in Eastern systems of thought than in Western ones. In particular,
And where do you put Jewish in that continuum?
I would, so I don't,
Or like even
so
Jewish
I guess,
esoteric, like Kabbalistic.
well, I was just going to say, like, it would relate more if I'm not making an East-West comparison. So what I was going to say was like more like Buddhism and Taoism. Like there's a lot of sympathies to those systems of thought with the kind of perspective that comes out of what I've been trying to do. Another way of cutting it would be more mystical traditions, definitely. So then that cuts across all religions, because all religions have a form of mysticism. So yeah, Kabbalah and Judaism, there's Christian mystics, Sufis. So all the Abrahamic religions have their version of that. And I think there's a kind of flexibility in the understanding of the world, and it's more about experience and cultivating states of consciousness, and having experiences that like navigating realms of consciousness, essentially. And the conceptual frameworks provide a kind of a guide, could help to sort of along that path to make sense of certain experiences. And I think there's a reason why there's a lot of sympathy. Shinzen Young was the first person I heard talk about this.
And who was he? Can you say who he was?
Yeah, not familiar.
He trained as a very experienced meditator. He trained in Zen Buddhist tradition, I believe. But he also learned a lot of science. But he learned the science, I think, after he reached these higher states of consciousness, and it sort of opened him up, his mind to. He lost the fear of mathematics and physics. And so he has really interesting things to say about the relationship between science and consciousness and spirituality.
It reminds me so much, losing the fear, your comment about that. I know we're going down, this is part of the playing cello, is we go down a road, and we may never go back to these other roads, but that's the fun of it. It's like a fugue. But this reminds me of the Ramachandran, the mathematician. Is that the name of the
Ramanujan.
Ramanujan, right.
Yeah.
Or Ramanujan, depending on how you actually pronounce
That's how
it.
I'm remembering it, but yeah.
Yeah, who actually said, yeah, all of these equations were written with blood on the tongue of the goddess or something like this. And Wright worked with W.H. Hardy, I believe.
Is he the one that comes to England?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
And
and they're like, he's not
dies
even
sort of young.
Yeah, he's young.
Yep.
He's not trained formally.
He's not trained,
but he
he's
has
like,
this interesting math, and it's like a diamond in the rough. But really, what they're saying is we're taking this Eastern person and putting him into the Western world and making him better. But in fact, he was like already super insightful. But that reminds me a little of that, is that losing the fear of the reality of you're not in control of your insight. You know, so there's this fear, that the fear of discovery, because if you ride the train of discovery, you discover that it's not you who's the engineer. Does that, am I picking up on that in you, or am I saying that myself? Are you saying that, or am I saying something else?
Well, let me tie it back in with what I was saying, and then we'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say, what Shinzen Young, I learned from him, because part of what he did, he had access to one of his mentor's libraries, and he just started reading all the books in that library, and it was, and there was a lot of books about different mystical traditions. This is the story as I remember it. And he was surprised to see how they were really just, from his perspective, describing the same thing. using different language from different perspectives. And this gets to where I think it relates to what you were saying is what's happening with mystical experience, in my view, and I think what he's saying is you really are navigating a territory that's there. And it's only navigable by actually having experiences of cultivating altered states of consciousness, primarily through meditation and other techniques. Like Sufis have the
dance,
the dervishes, right? And so because it's a territory, there's a kind of objectivity to it, even though it's subjectively navigated. So it's this weird interplay, sort of cross-cutting of these notions.
Yeah.
And there's something like that, I think, with in a different way with Ramanujan, in that his experience of it, he was communicating with some kind of goddess or spirit that was revealing these mathematical insights to him. So he was able to have certain kinds of conscious experience that enabled him to work with technical ideas that wasn't rational, like not fully rational in this sort of calculating sense. But there was something objective that he was connecting with, even though it's accessible in subjective experience in that way, and that he had access to, but others around him didn't.
Yeah.
And it's
that.
Yeah.
Sorry, that theme is I think pretty common among great thinkers, whether they were philosophers or spiritual thinkers or scientists or political philosophers. They often say, I can't tell you exactly where my idea came from, but one day it appeared in my head.